We're out here in the Arctic Ocean with my colleagues, and we're studying how sea ice forms. And we wanted to give you guys a little bit of a tour today about life and work on the ship. So let's go. We're going to start out on the main deck. So this is the main working deck for the ship. And as you can see, we're out in the Arctic Ocean right now, and it's a pretty stormy fall day. We've had a lot of wave energy and a lot of storm action, so we're actually not seeing a lot of sea ice at this site today, but there's sea ice growing all around us. And we're doing a variety of things to study that. We've got a lot of tools out here. We have cranes and A-frames and small boats. And we spend a lot of time having scientists, engineers, technicians, all working together to try to do some really cool science. Today we have a big instrument on the seafloor, a big frame with a lot of sensors, and we are trying to recover it to get data off of it, and then we want to put it back out so that it can sample for the whole winter. So there's some scientists over here. They have a device in the water that emits sound, and they're actually trying to talk to the sensor through sound so that we can send it some signals to bring it to the surface. All right, let's move on into our next working space. So in here, this is what's called the Baltic room, and you can kind of think of it like the garage bay in your house. This is sort of a staging area between us and the outdoors. We have a lot of cool instruments in here. This is what we call a tripod. It's a little frame that we deploy on the seafloor. And this was out for about 5 weeks, and we recovered it a couple days ago. And this is just like the one that's on the seafloor now that we're currently trying to bring back so that we can put it back out over the winter so it can collect data under the sea ice. We also have an array of drifters that we've been using. Those have an accelerometer, kind of like in your phone, that registers motion, and we use those to measure wave energy. And then this one suffered. It got hit by some sea ice and some waves, and the top broke off, and it got a little water inside of it. But that's okay. We kind of expect that that'll happen. So we always bring a lot of instruments, and oceanography sometimes involves losing things or having them broken. So it's a pretty harsh environment. There's a giant door here. That's an important part of the Baltic room. Every couple of days, that giant door opens, and there's a much smaller boat that is held up on another upper deck, and they actually lower that down on a little boat elevator. And we load up a lot of the gear that's in here, the sampling equipment, and we take the small boat into shallow water where the big ship can't reach. So we get water samples, we put out smaller versions of drifters, and we take out lasers and optical sensors, and we measure all sorts of water properties. And then we also have a giant CTD rosette. This is a hallmark of oceanography. This measures salinity and temperature, and this can go all the way down to the deep sea floor, several thousand meters below the surface. So there's a lot of stuff that happens in this room. We're always moving in and out of here. It's a place where we can bring muddy things, we can hose them down. We log all of our measurements on a computer. We log that things went over the side. And the best part about this room is that it's got a lot of heaters. So we're able to come in here and get warm and kind of get staged and ready for the next on-deck deployment. You might also notice that there's no ice on the deck, and the floor in here is very dry, even though we rinse a lot of stuff off, and that's because the deck is actually heated to keep ice off of it. And that's one of my favorite parts of the ship. It makes it a lot easier to work on here and work safely. So let's move on, and we'll go into some of the interior labs of the ship. This one is called the wet lab. So we kind of have this transition from the garage space into this wet lab where, depending on what type of science is happening, there might be chemistry tools in here. We have a lot of supplies set up right now for these moorings, these seafloor instrument packages that we deploy, and they require a lot of hardware and a lot of rigging. So you see lines, you see tools. We have a lot of special instrumentation that we strap onto these tripod frames to put out. This is an example of a sensor that we've been using. It's called a hydrophone, and it's basically just like an underwater microphone. So like an underwater version of the microphone I'm wearing to talk to you. And we suspend this in the water column, and it just listens, and it can hear whales, it can hear the ship noise. And we're hoping to measure other things. We can measure wave noise, and we can hear the ice moving around in the winter. So we like to deploy these for months at a time to measure sound. So we also have a lot of cold weather gear in here. This is kind of like our closet. It's where we get dressed to go outside. Going out to do work on deck requires a lot of equipment. You want to be safe out there. So we have these special suits. They look kind of dirty because we've been collecting a lot of mud, but this is like a full body size PFD or life vest. There's flotation all throughout this. And I really like these because not only do they keep you afloat if you fall overboard, but they keep you very warm. It's a lot of good insulation. So we wear full suits to go out in small boats. We wear sort of parka versions of PFDs to go out on deck. And we have a lot of good gloves and boots that we wear. This is one of our analytical labs, and there's a lot of sample processing that happens in here. What are you guys working on right now?
We are working on processing all of the ice that has melted from our workboat trips yesterday and turned into lovely muddy water. So we're doing two different things right now. We are filtering it for sediment concentration, and we are also running it through one of our instruments called the list, which measures the distribution of sizes of the sediment or the mud that is in suspension in the water. So we are letting the ice melt, we're putting a little bit through filtration, and then we are pumping a bunch of it through the instrument, the list, to understand how big the sand and mud particles are that we're seeing in the ice and water here.
Very cool. Yeah, so as scientists and as geologists, we're kind of interested in the fact that the ice is really muddy, and we're trying to measure how much dirt is in the ice. This is one of my favorite walls. You can see a lot of different displays on here. One of the main things we do is mapping. So we're always interested in mapping the seafloor, and we use acoustic sensors to do that. They send out a big swath of sound. It almost looks like an ultrasound that you might get at the doctor, only we're scanning the seafloor, and we can create 3D maps like this. So we know exactly what's down there. We can map interesting geology features, and we can also avoid running the ship into things that might be on the seafloor. We use other types of sound to actually look into the seafloor, so we can send out higher powered sound and we can get acoustic signatures below the seafloor to see what sorts of sediments are down there. So that's good for geology. We have a satellite array. It's tough in the Arctic to maintain good satellite communications, so we have some pretty high powered systems so that we can remain in touch and have internet to talk to you guys. So this is the mess hall or the dining hall. We typically call it the mess hall or a galley on a ship. And this is where we all get together to have 3 meals a day. And it's staffed by a galley crew of about 3 people, and they work extremely hard to make meals for everyone. And you know, I'm not that big of a fan of cooking at home. It's a lot harder on a ship when things are always moving, and they have to have some special tools to keep all the pots and pans on the burners and not have things flying all over the place in the waves. So it's a tough job out here. And then this is where we gather to eat. It's pretty fun. This is a nice place to get together and see people. We have safety meetings in here. We have meals. And this is where some really good brainstorming happens. You know, you can work on deck out all day, get kind of cold, come in, have a nice hot meal, and just sit with colleagues and talk about science, talk about the research, catch up with the crew on what's going on. So this is one of our favorite spaces. We also have a rec area behind here where we can watch movies. There's couches in there. We play a lot of cards out at sea. And we have an endless supply of snacks. They keep us very well fed. There's always chocolate. There's all sorts of things. So we just walked up 5 flights of stairs to get up to the bridge. The bridge is one of the tallest points on the ship. And this is where a lot of the navigation and the driving happens. So this is a pretty critical space. Up here, they have various navigational aids. So they have a lot of the old classic maps and charts, but they also have a lot of modern computer systems up here for looking at ice, managing the ship track. This is one of the radar computers that they use. The ship is always in the middle, and the radar can look out and see if there's any obstructions around us. It can also help us find things that we're looking for. So if we're looking for a drifter, we can often use that. Let's go over to this side. Over here, we've got a logbook area. The ship has to keep a very detailed log of everything that happens. If things go overboard, they keep track of the weather, take a lot of good notes. So a big part of doing field oceanography and going to sea is taking really good notes so we can remember everything that we did. If you can look out on the bow, there's an awful lot of ice out there. We had a lot of big waves in the last few days, and there was a lot of freezing spray. And that turns the bow of the ship white. And the crew actually has to go out every couple of days and knock the ice off. So if you can find a good baseball bat, it's a good hour spent out there trying to knock ice off of the ship. At a certain point, it actually makes the ship heavy, and they have to adjust the ballast, which is the amount of water they store on board, to compensate for that. And then you'll notice there's all these giant windows everywhere that give us a really good view so they can keep a lookout. And these have pretty fancy windshield wipers to try to keep them clean, because believe it or not, you can get sea spray this high off the water. We're about 5 stories up right now.